Scripture. Thank you for listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
The Simple Truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
Great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of Saint Joseph. It is Throwdown Thursday, where we focus on themes of spiritual warfare and the real challenges that are before us, all to better understand the battles that we're in, to actively, effectively engage in fighting the good fight, to participate with the grace of God that is being lavished upon us, and to share in the victory of Christ now and for all eternity. Our guest today is Dan Burke, a Catholic husband, father of four, grandfather, and the founder and president of the Avila Institute for Spiritual Formation, avila-institute.org. It offers graduate and personal enrichment studies in spiritual theology to priests, deacons, religious, and laity in 72 countries and prepares men for seminary in 30 dioceses. Dan is also the author and editor of many books on authentic Catholic spirituality, including Into the Deep, Finding Peace Through Prayer, Navigating the Interior Life, and Spiritual Warfare and the Discernment of Spirits. He also hosts the Divine Intimacy radio show with his wife Stephanie, which is broadcast weekly on EWTN Radio. So today is the third part of our three-part series with Dan, walking through the wisdom in his book, Spiritual Warfare and the Discernment of Spirits. We started with building the foundation in part 1. Last week in part 2, we looked at the first 7 of the 14 rules for the discernment of spirits. And today in part 3, Dan's going to help us to delve into the final 7. So once again, these rules come from the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola. There's also a classic 2005 book from Father Timothy Gallagher that unpacks them well, The Discernment of Spirits, an Ignatian Guide for Everyday Living. And then Dan Burke's book, Spiritual Warfare and the Discernment of Spirits, does a great job of giving concise explanations and getting to what is essential in these rules. Dan also has in-depth online courses at avila-institute.org that go through Father Gallagher's book as well if you're looking for even more. But again, very, very blessed to have Dan with us today as our guide. Dan Burke, how are you today?
Good. It's good to be back with you, and I'm sorry that this will be the end of our series together. I've really enjoyed it. And before I forget, I just thought of doing this, and I did it while we were revving up here. I posted a summary to the Discernment of Spirits that I compiled for our prayer book for our community, but I made it public at Apostoli VA. So it's a summary of the process of discernment, the definitions, the sources, and then the 14 rules that all fits on a sheet of paper. So you could go out there to the blog and copy it, paste it, and keep it with you or whatever. But I thought that might be helpful for your folks if they want to learn more. And as you know, on that site there are free courses. If they make a profile, all of it's free, no matter which way you slice it. So, I mean, not the Avila Institute. Everything on Apostoli VA is free. Okay,
all right. So that's apostoliva.org. Terrific, yeah. Outstanding. Yeah, thank you, Dan. And so getting into the rules here, we went through the first 7 last time. Just a reminder for folks if they forgot or if they didn't tune into the last part that rules 2 through 14, and we're walking through 8 through 14 today, they apply to those who are not in habitual mortal sin. These are for the purpose of advancing in holiness and participating with God's grace to become a saint, more and more to enter into who we are called to be. So if you are struggling in habitual mortal sin, and you need to find your way out of that, then definitely listen to the last show that we did, part 2, because rule number 1 of the rules for discernments is the one you really want to be paying attention to if that's where you're at. But again, we're going through rules through 8 through 14 today. So starting with rule number 8, I really like how in the book, Dan, Spiritual Warfare and the Discernment of Spirits, you put these questions in the headings for each rule. So for rule number 8, you put, how can I persevere when I am in desolation? And I think today, as the rules go, they begin to get a little bit more precise, or at least they maybe seem to for me. So I'm going to read the rules as we go, and then we'll have Dan unpack them for us. So this rule number 8, it says the following, quote, "Let one who is in desolation work to be in patience, which is contrary to the vexations which come to him. And let him think that he will soon be consoled, diligently using the means against such desolation, as said in the 6th rule," end of quote, which, if you remember in rule number 6, St. Ignatius of Loyola is talking there about more prayer, more meditation, examination, some suitable way of doing penance. All right, Dan, what do you have for us on rule number 8?
Well, he says, work to be in patience. And one of my students, it shocked them, which surprised me, which was interesting, because I thought, well, maybe that's an insight into the way most people think. She said, I never thought that I had to work to be patient. I always thought I was either patient or I wasn't. And so, but you have to work to be patient. Well, how do you do that? Ignatius reveals this over and over. Let him think. Or he uses the word consider, or, So what does that mean? It means you should intellectually affirm this reality and just do it this way. In Jesus' name, I feel terrible, but I affirm and believe it will come to an end soon. And when it comes to an end, I'm going to feel fine, and all of this will pass. So something like that. It doesn't matter exactly how you do it. I learned this rule being hospitalized so many times and having so many surgeries, and I don't remember how many. But when I first read this rule, I thought, I get that rule, because I know exactly what happens when I go in. I know what it feels like to go under anesthesia. I know what it feels like to come out of anesthesia. I know what it feels like to have bones fused together or stuff taken out or repaired. I know what it's like to, get past the anesthesia. I know the process, right? Which is what we're talking about. So when you understand the process, you can relax, because you go, well, this is going to happen. It's going to hurt a little bit, then it's going to be over, and I'm going to be okay. So if we think like that, and we act in faith, make an act of faith, which is simply a proclamation of, I believe you, Jesus. I believe you, Lord. I believe you're speaking through St. Ignatius. I believe you in the scriptures, and I believe and have hope, the theological virtue of hope, and I choose it, that I'm going to be fine, and when this lifts, everything's just going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, outstanding. And any advice for us when, so if we're in this state of interior desolation and we don't work to be impatient, what would be the things to help us to kind of remember, okay, I'm in desolation, I'm being impatient, and I need to work to be in patience? Are there any triggers we should look for there?
Yeah, I think the issue is a lot of what we've talked about is being awake. And the biggest problem really is being aware that I'm in desolation. Once you're aware, means you can think about your thinking, if that makes any sense. And Father Gallagher does a great deal of talking about this idea of human beings are the only creature created by God that has the ability, on earth anyway, to think about their thinking. So, but we don't always exercise it, because when we're wounded or we hurt or we're in desolation, we focus on the hurt and on the desolation. So the first thing has to be is that we begin to practice the discernment of spirits, which means when we recognize when we're in desolation, we're awake, And then because of these rules, we can understand what to do about it. We begin to think about our thinking. So sometimes you just need to get away. You need to step out of your circumstances, because maybe it's desolation from a bad relationship or a destructive circumstance or something that's scaring you or giving you anxiety. And you need to step away and say, okay, I'm in desolation now. Please, Lord, give me patience. Help me. I need patience. Help me understand why I'm struggling with this. But in Jesus' name, I know it's going to be over. And it's one of the many tools in the tool belt that Ignatius gives us to fight desolation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. And so while we are working to be working to be in patience, not impatient, but trying to be patient here, what do we're going to get into this 9th rule, which really flows from it. So we can think about, while we are working hard to be in patience, we can think about what are the causes of this desolation. We can examine that some. St. Ignatius of Loyola unpacks that in rule number 9. There are 3 principal causes for desolation, he says. The first is because we are tepid, slothful, or negligent in our spiritual exercises, and so through our faults, spiritual consolation withdraws from us. The second, to try us and reveal where we really are and how much we extend ourselves in his service and praise without payment of consolations and increased graces. The third, to give us true recognition and understanding so that we may interiorly feel that it is not ours to attain or maintain increased devotion, intense love, tears, or any other spiritual consolation, but that all is the gift and grace of God our Lord, and so that we may not build a nest in something belonging to another, raising our mind in some pride or vainglory, attributing to ourselves the devotion or consolation. All right, there's a lot in there. Dan is going to unpack that for us when we get back here. And again, very, very helpful, practical understandings that we can have walking away from this show today that are going to help us to advance even a little bit further. So stay tuned on The Simple Truth. We'll be right back.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for August 19th. Today we celebrate St. John Eudes. The name of today's saint may not be immediately familiar, but his love for the hearts of Jesus and Mary led Pope Pius XI to declare John Eudes the father of that devotion. He worked for the establishment of a feast day honoring the Sacred Heart, which came about 100 years after he lived. Born in France at the start of the 17th century, John joined the religious community of the Oratorians and was ordained a priest. During severe plagues, he volunteered to care for the stricken in his own diocese. He worked tirelessly as a parish missionary, earning a reputation as one of France's greatest preachers. John's concern with the need for spiritual growth among the clergy prompted him to seek permission to found a new community. That became the Congregation of Jesus and Mary, also called the Eudists. The group was devoted to the formation of the clergy in seminaries. John also founded the Sisters of Charity of the Refuge for women, devoted to serving former prostitutes who wish to do penance and change their lives. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
The Station of the Cross thanks our financial supporters who have enabled us to broadcast Catholic programs for more than 20 years. As a nonprofit lay organization not affiliated with your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported. Through your generosity, we're able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel message and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments. Thank you for your continued support, and may God bless you and your family.
Jim Havens here with our guest today, Dan Burke, president of the Avila Institute for Spiritual Formation, avila-institute.org, also the author of many books. We are talking today about his book, Spiritual Warfare and the Discernment of Spirits. Also, Dan is offering a resource that is available to you if you go to apostoliviae.org. That's apostoliviae.org. It's a worldwide Catholic community coming together to know God and grow deeper in Him. There's formation and fellowship for advancing in our pilgrimage to heaven. Many free mini courses on that site as well on discernment of spirits, mental prayer, the examen, and much more. So we're in the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. He gives us these rules for discernment. There's 14 of them. We are now on rule number 9. Dan's unpacking these for us today. And rule number 9, what are the causes of desolation? You take what is quite dense in this rule, Dan. You make it very simple for us in the book. Help us now. How can we understand rule number 9?
Yeah, so basically we're back to thinking about our thinking and trying to understand, why am I in desolation? And so St. Ignatius gives us 3 reasons. 1, neglect or tepidity, which means we're lukewarm, we're not really fervent in following our spiritual disciplines. Well, what does that mean? That means, if Jim made a commitment to get up at 6 every day and pray for 30 minutes, practice mental prayer, but over the last week he's been slacking, he's not praying his 30 minutes, God will bless him with a little dashboard light on his spiritual car that says, Jim, I love you. You need to get back on track. And that's one of the reasons that Rule 9 gives us. So it's a dashboard light that says check engine. It's not as clear as we'd like it to be, but it says check engine. And there are 3 things that can be wrong with the engine. One is Jim's not doing what he committed to do. So that's one. The second is, sorry to pick on you, Jim, I should have used somebody else's name, but maybe the producer. The second is to reveal to you whether or not you're properly oriented to loving and following God because it's right and just, or you're doing it because of the good the feelings you get from Him. So that's a check engine light that says you may be following Him for a reason that's okay for a child or an immature Christian to do so, not okay as you're growing deeper in love with God. You should be following Him because it's right and good, not because of what He gives you. So sometimes desolation will reveal, I'm really not, my motivations are not right. And the third reason is basically just to get us to humility. It's to show us, because sometimes we can ride high, and Jim, I'm sure you've been through this. There's a period where you go through this conversion. I don't mean, even if you're a cradle Catholic, it's normal for a healthy cradle Catholic to go through multiple conversion. So you're in a conversion, you're riding high, you're doing your disciplines, your chest is puffed out, you're like, I got this. And he says, Jim, you're doing really well, and I love you, and you're a good man. But you have to understand where the ultimate source. We're not Pelagians here. We're people of God. We're dependent on God. And I need you to know the good that you experience comes from me. So draw near to me and keep cooperating, and all will be well. So those are the 3 reasons that desolation can come.
Okay, yeah, that very, very helpful. So what we need to check on then in that experience is check our commitments. Are we being faithful to our commitments? Get back to our commitments if we're not. Check our hearts. Are we truly loving God for His own sake? If not, strive to get back to our first love. And also, are we really relying on Him, or are we kind of forgetting about Him and just doing it, doing it on our own? So get back to, I guess, that poverty of spirit, really remembering the truth that we have to rely on him for all things. That's very, very helpful. I think probably most people can relate to those points where they can think of times where they've struggled and they realize, those are areas that definitely can lead one into struggle in a place that you need to come back to. So again, seeing the wisdom here of this great saint, Saint Ignatius of Loyola. Rule number 10, how should I act or prepare when I am in consolation? The rule reads as follows, quote, let the one who is in consolation think how he will conduct himself in the desolation which will come after, taking new strength for that time, end of quote. All right, Dan, preparing for desolation when we're in consolation. Help us to understand this one better.
Yeah, so a lot of people who, convert or begin to care about these things can have a wrong view of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Because he didn't say, take up my lounge chair and follow me. Take up your lounge chair and follow me. He didn't say, take up your martini by the pool and follow me. He said, take up your cross and follow me. And so when you begin to become an authentic disciple of Jesus, you begin to realize, wow, this is a fight. And now I'm in the fight. Before I was simply subdued and managed by the demonic forces. Now I'm fighting them, and this is a little tough. And so what can happen is you realize there's these undulations of consolation and desolation. When you're in consolation, it's really important that you realize, okay, I'm in consolation. Praise the Lord. I need to rest, and I need to get prepared, which means I need to stick to my spiritual disciplines. I need to stay close to Him in the Eucharist and reconciliation, and just be ready for when the battle rises again. And it's not a big deal. Scupoli, the author of Spiritual Combat, which is a book that St. Francis de Sales carried around in his pocket, said that you need to learn how to love the fight, not the victory, until at least we see him face to face. Then you get to love the victory, because the battle rages until we see him face to face. So this is really a saying, recognize you're in a war and it's not going to end until you die, and then all rewards come then, and rest comes then. Now we get to rest at times through this gentle, loving, consolation that the Lord gives us. But that's just to prepare us for the next fight. Why might be a question somebody asked. The reason why is because, one, we're advancing the kingdom of God against the kingdom of darkness, and we're spreading the gospel, and that's a fight. The gates of hell won't prevail because we're pushing against them and they can't hold us back. So authentic disciples get in the fight to advance the kingdom, but we also get in the fight to subdue our lower nature, to subdue the parts of us that are not oriented to God properly. And so that's also a battle as well. And that's a drawing of God's drawing of us to Him through the fight, is purifying us so that we might be ever more close to Him in relationship. Because every fight, if fought well, and we don't always do that, but hopefully we do most of the time, it peels away layers of brokenness, sin, and brings us to deeper healing. So we have this great benefit of learning how to be good warriors, but also as we become good warriors for the Lord, He's also healing us and strengthening us and creating a battlefield, if you will, that's ever broadening, that we can take on and bring into submission of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That image of being refined by the Lord. Just trusting in Him and what He's doing. I think back to the rule right before, with respect to this, as you're speaking about it, to say, is this also a good time to keep our eye on those things that can cause the desolation as well? So to keep our eye on keeping our commitments, loving God for His own sake, and relying on God, not going off on our own.
You got it exactly right. Yeah, it's a time, if you think about the battle, it's a time you check your ammo. It's a time you go, okay, how are my supplies? What are our supplies, and what's our battle? What are our tools? What are our weapons? What's going on with my mind? How am I applying my heart and mind? Am I wasting time on junk in life, or am I giving myself to spiritual reading? Am I consuming only those things that help me to heaven? So that means your ammo supply is increasing, your strength is increasing, so that when you enter into the battle, you're better prepared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one more follow-up question on this, because this is jumping out to me, is just this sense that I think for a lot of us, we experience this sense of when we get a little bit of air, when we get a little bit of space, a little bit of free time, right? Things seem like they're going well, and we've got a few minutes or whatever. We kind of want to take some comfort, right? We want to go to something that we want to have the drink by the pool or whatever it might be. Any advice for us in that to say, oh, okay, there are good things, but there's certainly temperance, obviously, but also, is there a way that we even want to have our minds, our hearts refined, so that maybe we're looking for something else in those moments than just like, okay, what can I consume at this time? What can I do at this time? Because things are going pretty well and I have a moment.
Yeah, and so you're going right back to the beginning of the book where we talked about taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. We reviewed that passage that says whatever is good, whatever is just, whatever is beautiful and true, dwell on these things, right? So that's what we should be doing. St. John of the Cross takes it up another level, and he says, do not give your heart and mind to anything that doesn't help you to God or help you to serve and love other people, to extend on that a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I tossed the TV long more than maybe it's like 20 years now. YouTube creeps back in, and social media, and I busted out of social media more than a year ago, and I haven't been back. God be praised. But those are the choices I've had to make, because what I've discovered is those activities weaken my spiritual health. And so I'm resting in a way that's destructive. There's a way to rest that is constructive. There is something called holy leisure, and but it's holy leisure. It's rest that draws your heart and mind to God, and to service to others, and to exercise, and to long walks, and to reading, and getting back to things that we used to do as a norm in the United States, at least in countries where you have that freedom. So those are the things that I would do.
Terrific. All right, rule number 11. How can humility help me to deal with the ebb and flow of consolation and desolation? The text of the rule is as follows, quote, let one who is consoled seek to humble himself and lower himself as much as he can, thinking of how little he is capable in the time of desolation without such grace or consolation. On the contrary, let one who is in desolation think that he can do much with God's sufficient grace to resist all his enemies, taking strength in his Creator and Lord. End of quote.
So we're back to thinking, right? One who's in consolation thinks a certain way, one who's in desolation thinks a certain way. And it's another look at the problem, and it's a little bit of a rehash of some of the other things we've covered, but he's just trying to make the point that there's this ebb and flow. When you're feeling well, good, humble yourself. When you're in desolation, console yourself that in God you can do anything. It's a very, very simple rule, and it's something you learn almost, it becomes an innate understanding, practice understanding as you practice the rules.
Outstanding. Yes, we will be right back with Dan Burke talking about spiritual warfare and the discernment of spirits. Got a few rules left to go, and we're gonna take some time really allowing ourselves to soak into this wisdom. We'll be right back on The Simple Truth. Stay tuned.
If the cares and anxieties of life are weighing you down, come to the St. Thomas More House of Prayer and allow the Lord to refresh your soul. The St. Thomas More House of Prayer is a Catholic retreat center devoted to praying and promoting the Liturgy of the Hours. You'll find a tranquil atmosphere that's ideal for deep prayer, whether as an individual or for a group retreat. We're located at 365 Hill City Road in Cranberry, Pennsylvania. Make your reservation today or learn more at liturgyofthehours.org. You can also call us at 814-676-1910. That's 814-676-1910. We would love to help you experience the Liturgy of the Hours and discover the prayer that will change your life.
Hello, this is Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life. Rabbi Yehuda Levin, speaking for more than 1,000 rabbis, has praised the Church's message that we have a moral responsibility to vote for public officials who defend the right to life. Rabbi Levin said, quote, "This moral teaching of the Catholic Church is clearly found in the Torah and serves to give solid guidance to voters, whether they are Christian, Jew, or any man of faith." This is Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life.
Each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern, the Station of the Cross brings you Mother Miriam Live.
We have a call from Ed.
Hi, good morning, Mother Miriam. I just want to tell you, you got me all fired up like you usually do. Thank you for all you do. We love you out here in Massachusetts.
Tune in from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern for Mother Miriam Live on the Station of the Cross and our free iCatholic Radio mobile app. You can also watch the video stream every day on Facebook or on YouTube.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Dan Burke, president of the Avila Institute for Spiritual Formation, avila-institute.org, also author and editor of many books on authentic Catholic spirituality, including Into the Deep, Finding Peace Through Prayer, Navigating the Interior Life, and Spiritual Warfare and the Discernment of Spirits, the book that we are talking about today. He also co-wrote a great book called The Contemplative Rosary with Connie Rossini. This is a great one. And I also want to mention, too, the resources that are available at the website spiritualdirection.com. It's a website with the central purpose of helping you grow spiritually by providing thousands of articles, videos, and other powerful materials rooted in the magisterium, faithful, mystical tradition of the Church. Very, very needed in our time. And also want to mention as well, there are events at that website, spiritualdirection.com. If you go to the event tab, you're going to find some great stuff. One of those events is next summer, the Avila Summit 2022, and the topic of it is Spiritual Warfare and Discernment of Spirits. It's going to be July 15th through July 17th at Ave Maria University, Ave Maria, Florida, so something you might be interested in. And also something more recent coming up, a free webinar on the Holy Eucharist and Reverence that Dan is doing with Father Robert Altier, who is a friend of this program as well. You know it's going to be great. Holy Eucharist and Reverence, free webinar next Tuesday, August 24th, 7 p.m. Central Time. Again, spiritualdirection.com. Click on the events tab. All right, so we left off with rule number 11. And Dan, I wanted to ask if you could just share a little bit. In the book, you do a great job unpacking this rule, talking about how the pilgrim will begin to notice, becoming more and more spiritually mature, that he is less reactive to the stimulus of difficult events in life and the temptation to desolation. Can you explain that, being less reactive to the stimulus of difficult events in life?
Yeah, so what happens is, if you think of a dog and the way it operates, right? It has a stimulus and it pursues it, or it's controlled by it. So it has a sexual drive, it pursues that if it's in pain, or if you scare it or put it in a corner, it's going to bite you. You know, it's very predictable. But as humans, which are a much higher order of being, if you will, creation in the image of God, we have the ability to not be controlled by our lower nature, by those drives. But instead, and how our lower nature reacts or to our brokenness or to the brokenness around us. And so what that means is that as you mature spiritually, I'll give you an example. When I was a young man, wrath was a real problematic sin for me. I was very angry. I came from an abusive home. And so I dealt with that through anger. And so when something I didn't like happened, I would get in a fight or run somebody off the freeway and try to fight those guys in that car or whatever, just stupid things that I would do, but just purely guttural reacting, right? But as I came to Christ and realized that was sinful, I began to fight the wrath in me, and then noticed over time there was this distance building between the stimulus, which is essentially the invitation of the world, the flesh, and the devil to sin, and my reaction. And then eventually what happened is there was a short break and I'd still sin. Then there was a longer break and I'd still sin. And then there was a little longer break between the stimulus and reaction. And then that time I would sin less and do the right thing a little more. And then there's a longer break, and the Holy Spirit in each of those breaks is giving me more and more control, if you will, over my faculties, over my response, until the end, where I don't know that I'm exactly here now, but the height of this reality is when you have a stimulus, whatever it is, anything that bothers you, it would cause anxiety or difficulty or whatever, you respond. You don't react, so you're no longer controlled by the stimulus, but instead you respond based on God's will as it relates to that situation. And so now you become an agent of God instead of an agent of the devil or sin or your own brokenness. So that's really the process of, and really what happens when anyone is an authentic disciple of Jesus, they begin to see this reality in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how does that connect with rule number 11, humility helping us to deal with the ebb and flow of consolation and desolation?
I mean, being humble is essentially, so a Catholic understanding of humility is Godward self-awareness. So what does that mean? It means that Jim has an relatively accurate understanding of who he is based on Jesus as the prime example of who we should be, or the Blessed Mother, based on what God has revealed and what he's called to. And Jim knows where God is, and in that he has a realistic sense of who he is. That's humility. Humility is not, oh, I'm bad, or oh, I'm weak, or oh, that's not humility. Humility is simply an accurate understanding of who you are. So when you have an accurate understanding of who you are, you know what you're capable of and you know what you're not. And if you're humble, you recognize I could fall easily at any time. You recognize you need the strength of God. You recognize that you're dependent on him for all in any of the good. And so when you're in that state of consolation, you draw near to God in that reality. When you're in desolation, you're drawing near to God with a less of a sense of his presence, but you're exercising an act of will to say, listen, I know he's with me. I know he's given me what I need. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to resist. And you hear, some Rule 8 in here. That's why I said it echoes a lot of the different things that we're learning. So that's how I think I would apply it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very, very, very helpful. And, there's a sense in this where it's, remembering both of those, those items that we talked about. I guess it was, I think it was Rule 9, the loving him for his own sake and relying on him. Those two things are just so core. They're coming up to me they're stirring up for me as you're speaking here, to say that, as we see reality as it really is, the fact is that we want to draw into this prayer life. We want to draw into the sacraments, the sacramental graces that are available for those two reasons, right? We need him. We want to rely on him. But somebody from the outside looking in might be like, oh, you think you have to do all these things or else you're not going to be able to live life. But the other reason is it's because we love him and we want to be with him in prayer and in his sacramental graces, the way that he has set up for us to encounter him in the sacraments. So amazing. So if we can see it as it really is, it does begin to open up for us. I do want to encourage people to listen to part 1 of this discussion if they haven't, where Dan really lays out that paradigm of ascent. You can also learn more at, I'm sure, other resources that he has, apostoleva.org and Spiritual Direction. But this is the sense that we have to continue this ongoing conversion. Remember that we're relying on God, we love Him, and also we mess up. Right? We sin, we are weak, we do make mistakes, we do fail. And in those times, to say we're sorry, to go back to confession once more, or to just turn to the Lord and say we're sorry. If it's mortal sin, obviously we need to get to confession. But also anybody that's been, that we've hurt, we want to say we're sorry to them as well. And this is the process of this purification, of this sanctification that we are in. Dan, anything more that you want to say on that?
No, I think it's a good, rule. This rule is simple. I think the next one's got a lot more meat to the bones.
Yeah, let's get into that one. And this is rule number 12, understanding and dealing with the aggression and threats of the enemy. It reads as follows, quote, "The enemy acts like an aggressive dog in being weak when faced with strength and strong when faced with weakness. When an aggressive dog is faced with firm opposition, it loses heart and flees. On the contrary, if the person begins to lose heart and flee, the anger, ferocity, and vengeance of the dog knows no bounds. In the same way, it is proper to the enemy to weaken and lose heart, fleeing and ceasing his temptations, when the person who is exercising himself in spiritual things confronts the temptations of the enemy firmly, by doing what is diametrically opposed to them. On the contrary, if the person who is exercising himself begins to be afraid and lose heart in suffering the temptations, there is no beast so fierce on the face of the earth as the enemy of human nature in following out his damnable intention with such growing malice." That's Rule 12. Help us understand this one.
Okay, so I changed the translation of Ignatius' rule. If folks listening, somebody might catch it just because it's less offensive. And I actually think it's a better way of doing it, because most of us have seen an aggressive dog, and most of us have been told by our parents, don't run, because as soon as you run, that thing is going to know you're mine, and I'm going to come take you. I'm going to come take you out. So you've got to be really careful. It is in the nature of a bad dog, if you will, to try to dominate other creatures around him. And when you turn and run, he knows he can dominate you, so you have to face him. And there's an issue here that's really important, is that you need to face that bad dog with firm opposition quickly. So there's two aspects of it. One, when you face him, I don't know why demons are made this way, but like you and I, and I say this to my students, who usually there's 65 of them, priests, religious, laity. One's from Africa, one's from Syria, and one just in this last class, right? And so I'd say we're all created in a way where there's a lot of things that are unique about us. We have the same drives, similar drives, and all of that. So human creatures have characteristics that are common to all of us. Demons do as well. And for whatever reason, demons do not like you to know that they're working, which we'll talk about more in the next rule. But when they're aware that you're aware and you're facing them down, it's like turning the lights on in the house when a burglar comes. And actually, I'm blending Rule 12 and 13. But the point being, when it knows you have its number, it gets weak. It's just the way it is. It's why in an exorcism, and I've been in many, when the demon is forced to reveal its name, the exorcist has more power over them. So when we face the enemy, it loses power. It's just the way it is. It's the law of the way the thing is designed. And when we face him quickly, all the more, because then there's no hesitancy or perceived weakness. Even if we're afraid interiorly, even if we're struggling interiorly, we still need to face it with strength. So that's really clear. But maybe what might be helpful is to give you some, summaries of this. When we act slowly against the enemy's attacks, his strength grows against us. When we act slowly in response to God's command, his strength weakens within us. So this is a very destructive cycle. So when we're slow against the enemy, his strength grows. When we're slow in response to God's opposite commands, if you will, or opposite instruction, his strength weakens within us. Not in terms of his ultimate strength, but in terms of how it manifests within us. Conversely, when we act quickly against the enemy's attacks, his strength and resolve weakens against us. When we act quickly in response to God's commands, his strength grows within us. So it gives us strength to fight that bad dog. So we got to react quickly, be firm, and do the exact opposite of what he's trying to get us to do. If he's trying to get you to sin, run hard the exact opposite direction. And that's what it means to stand against the bad dog, is to do the exact opposite with full force of what he's trying to get you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. So reject that temptation to sin. Dive into the prayer. He's trying to keep you away from whatever it is diametrically opposed to whatever the enemy is trying to do. Go to the Lord, and with great strength, even if you're not feeling with it, come, Lord Jesus, help us. When we come back, rule number 13, it goes right along with this, as Dan was saying, and then rule number 14, we will close it out when we get back with Dan Burke. Stay tuned.
This is a segment about small Catholic innovations that made a huge impact, from the OSV Institute for Catholic Innovation. The bread Catholics are known for is the Eucharist. The body of Christ. Rightly so. But I'd wager there's another, less special bread that we should also be recognized for. The pretzel. Back in the year 600 AD, Lenten fasting rules were pretty strict. So some monks got creative. They developed a bread recipe that was just flour, water, and salt.
That's easy.
Legend has it that the monks wanted to make the bread into a shape that reminded them of Lent. A young monk noticed the way his brothers crossed their arms over their chests while praying, and voila, the pretzel was born. The Latin word for pretzel even means little arms.
Aw, how cute.
So, you can thank Catholic innovation for pretzels. Learn more about what OSV Institute is doing to inspire and encourage Catholic innovation at osvinstitute.com.
Praise be to Jesus. Hi, this is Joe McLean, host of the Catholic Drive Time Morning Show, joining you on the Station of the Cross each weekday morning at 7 a.m. We'll keep you informed and inspired with insightful guests and breaking news stories of the day. That's the Catholic Drive Time, weekday morning, 7 a.m. on the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic radio app. We'll see you then. May God love you.
There's so much confusion in our world today over what love is. By displaying a Catholic Radio bumper magnet on your car, you'll help others understand love as designed by God. Order your free bumper magnets at thestationofthecross.com. We'd be happy to send bumper magnets for your listening area so that others can come to know the Lord. That's thestationofthecross.com. Thank you for sharing Catholic Radio on the road.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Dan Burke, Avila-Institute.org, spiritualdirection.com, and apostoleva.org. We are on rule number 13 of the Rules for the Discernment of Spirits, the power of exposing the enemy's efforts. Quote, likewise, he conducts himself as a false lover, in wishing to remain secret and not be revealed. For a dissolute man, speaking with evil intention, makes dishonorable advances to a daughter of a good father or a wife of a good husband, wishes his words and persuasions to be secret, and the contrary displeases him very much. When the daughter reveals to her father or the wife to her husband his false words and depraved intention, because he easily perceives that he will not be able to succeed with the undertaking begun. In the same way, when the enemy of human nature brings his wiles and persuasions to the just soul, he wishes and desires that they be received and kept in secret. But when one reveals them to one's good confessor or to another spiritual person who knows his deceits and malicious designs, it weighs on him very much, because he perceives that he will not be able to succeed with the malicious undertaking he has begun, since his manifest deceits have been revealed. All right, Dan, rule number 13.
So we set this up a little bit in the previous rule, and in fact, this is one of the ways to fight that mad dog in that we talked about in rule number 12. And in fact, I would say if there were two rules I wanted folks to remember from the Discernment of Spirits in our series we've done together, it's number 5 and number 13, because I've experienced them to be the most powerful. So basically what I mentioned before is demons don't like to be exposed. So the illustration I gave in my book is that when a robber is trying to get into your house, he naturally gets nervous when the lights come on. Why? Because he can be seen, it weakens his resolve, all of that. Similarly, when we, let's say, Jim, you're part of I have a prayer group that supports me in prayer all the time. We actually support each other, and we're on WhatsApp, And so it's very common that when I'm in desolation, that I'll just put one word in that group, desolation, and then I press send. Everybody in that group, because they're part of Apostolic VA community or they're priests who support the community, they know what that means. And so they begin to pray, right? And so not only have the lights come on, but now friends of the owner of the house begin to gather. What does that do to a burglar trying to get in? He's going, whoa, whoa. Actually happened on my street one time. There was a guy who was on drugs who started wandering into our neighborhood. Somebody called another, and by within a few minutes before he got about, a third of the way in, there were 6 guys out, all, ready to face this guy and say, okay, what are you doing here? Why are you? He was obviously on drugs, and so then they called the police, but whatever he was doing or coming to do, if it was nefarious, I can tell you, as soon as those guys started to gather, his resolve declined, and he's now going, okay, how do I get out of here? I don't know how to get out of here. What do I do? So that's really this rule. It's breaking the silence. The key, though, is that we got to tell a spiritual person, not someone who's going to say, oh yeah, it's understandable that you feel that way about your spouse or your husband. They're kind of a jerk, and you don't want somebody encouraging you in your desolation for whatever reason that you're in it. But you want somebody who says, yeah, I understand. The same thing with my wife. The most common spiritual warfare I participate in conjunction with my wife is a text like that, desolation, or she'll say, can you pray over me? And so I'll pray over her. I might get holy water and put the sign of a cross or whatever. But the key is he wants us to remain weak, which means isolated, and that his activities are secret. That's when he's the strongest. As soon as you start flipping the lights on and bringing friends, he starts to lose his resolve and turn. So this is a very, very powerful tool to fighting the way that against that angry dog. The other thing with a bad dog, you get 2 or 3 guys standing around and telling the dog no. I've even seen bear attacks on video, not personally, but bear attacks where the bear was dissuaded because there was a group yelling and screaming at the thing, rather than just one person on his own who may have been taken out because the enemy perceives he can overpower the person. So very, very powerful rule. When you're in desolation, break the spiritual silence, tell somebody who's holy, and then ask for prayer, pray with them, and you will find it's very, very effective. Sometimes just sending the text, my desolation lifts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, bring it to the light. All right, rule number 14. Here we go. How to strengthen yourself against spiritual attack. Quote, likewise, he conducts himself as a leader intent on conquering and robbing what he desires. For just as a captain and leader of an army in the field, pitching his camp and exploring the fortifications and defenses of a stronghold, attacks it at the weakest point, In the same way, the enemy of human nature, roving about, looks in turn at all our theological, cardinal, and moral virtues, and where he finds us weakest and most in need for our eternal salvation, there he attacks us and attempts to take us. Rule number 14, Dan.
Yes, so he's always watching you, bud. In Scripture, it says the devil is constantly prowling about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he's going to devour. He's always watching Jim Havens. Every minute of the day, that's all he does, is watch you and watch where you click. By the way, I'm not revealing anything to the audience. Jim and I don't know each other very well at all, but that's what he does. Where do you click? Who do you stare at for too long if you do? What irritates you? What bothers you? What makes you anxious? What makes you sad? What makes you, and he's trying to find a kink. And so the way that we combat this issue is that we, as you said earlier about when we talked about holy leisure, when we're in consolation, we're constantly walking around and we're shoring up our virtues, fortitude, justice, the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love, whatever they are. And we test our boards ourselves and say, how am I doing in this area? Because he's testing them. And if one of them's weak, he's going to bust into our little fort. If they're strong, and we're always testing them and always being aware and always fortifying them, then he won't get in. But if you get lax in any particular discipline, and for guys in sexual issues can be, especially for young men, very difficult. You catch yourself staring too long, at the gym. Instead of staring at the bolt, you're staring at other stuff, that you shouldn't be staring at, or clicking where you shouldn't click and doing it. And, but you conquered that maybe in the past. And the enemy then will figure out ways to bring those things to your memory and your mind, and then begin to break down that fortification. So whatever your root sin is, whatever your pattern of sin is in your life, that's the one he's going to come in most commonly, and we got to strengthen that. An example I give a lot is, I live in Bessemer, Alabama right now, and we usually are in the top 10 list for violence per 100 cities with 100,000 population. And it's like being in downtown Bessemer and having windows open and doors off their hinges. That's what habitual sin does to you. So those are just invitations for the bad guys to come beat you up and take your stuff and abuse you. But you've got to strengthen those entryways with virtue and make sure your doors and windows are barred, and then the enemy won't have his way with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a blessing it's been, Dan Burke. We're going to miss you. Thursdays won't be the same without you next week, but thank you so much for all your generosity coming on with us 3 straight weeks and helping us to unpack this.
It's been a joy being with you. Thanks for having me.
All right, absolutely. And for ongoing formation, spiritualdirection.com, avila-institute.com, and the community at apostoliva.org. Yes, pray for Dan, pray for all of his good work in Thanksgiving, but also that the Lord would continue to bear great fruit in him and through him and all those that are with him in this good work that he's doing. God bless you all.
St. Joseph,